Ooh yeah! As an ultra-masculine, certified, axe-wielding Viking, let me tell you something, brother. Nothing makes me more soaking wet than being surrounded by chickens. Hello viewers, and welcome to the Craft Mask, home of custom action figures and toys. I am your host, Charlie, and I nearly died. Last holiday season, I caught some deathly disease. Obviously, I survived, thus my torment continues.
I always believed that death is a fate far better than life.
But one good thing did come of it. While mummified in blankets, I finally sat still long enough to play Valheim. And for those who don't know, it's a game based on Norse mythology, where you play as a Viking who's already dead and stuck in the realm of Valheim, basically Viking purgatory, where you have a second chance to earn your place in Valhalla, Viking heaven. This means most of your time is spent being harassed by trolls, working really hard for no money, and dying when the temperature doesn't suit you. So of course I like it. It's just like being a YouTuber. It's a little bit Minecraft, it's a little bit Dark Souls, and it kept me terminally distracted while terminally ill. It only took about 370 hours for me to hate it more than I loved it, and I still went back for another 7 because I found a mod that let me play as a mushroom person. But honestly, it's a great game, and it's not even fully complete yet. So tonight I'm paying homage to Ulla, my in-game character, wearing my second favorite armor set. Bearskin's #1, baby! But YouTube won't let me make that video. So, settling for what we can get away with, let's get on with the show! Our base figure for this project is this Kordax guy from that one Aquaman movie that I did not watch. Normally, we'd start with disassembly, but look! This figure disassembled itself about 5 minutes out of the box. How convenient! So obviously I had some repairs to do first, but I've put that in its own short video, which you can watch here. With the repairs set aside, the project begins for reals, with the cutting off of all the unnecessary bits, scraping off the mold lines, and scuffing and sculpting over all of the exposed pegs. While doing all of that, I discovered that the black trident is actually gold underneath. Like, they painted over the classic Aquaman trident, instead of just casting it from black plastic.
How peculiar.
Speaking of Aquaman, I had one lying around and I tried to steal his shoes, because they were daintier, and had a little heel too. Styling. Alas, they had a very different kind of peg shape, so the lady is stuck with her gnarly Kordax feet. Ah yes, this will be a lady Viking. It is my player character after all. What, you think I would willingly stare at man-ass for over 300 hours? Well, so, surprise! To everyone who wasn't paying attention, this is a gender-affirming custom. Happy Pride Month, everybody. I sure am glad I finished this project in time. Hopefully it releases into a future world where this kind of content is still legal. Now, before I went and did some stuff that I could not undo, I made a bunch of picture overlays to map out Ulla's rocking new bod. Then, with various burrs and sounding drums, I shaved down the very masculine square into a more feminine square. Have you seen the ladies in this game?
What's the matter? You can't stand the sight of a strong Nord woman?
I used polymer clay to fill out the space under her navel, because her skirt would have to sit much lower on her hip so that the belt around her waist would be visible. And it would have to be visible because only a fool doesn't have Meningord equipped at all times. Never leave home without it. No mod is without consequence though, and I had to file down part of the T-bone in her pelvis because it got in the way of her longer abdomen and refused to let her bend over. Just criminal. With how much running around a Viking does, you'd think they'd have a substantial derriere. But if I made hers any bigger, I wouldn't be able to put on or take off her skirt, so her glutimus must remain a minimus. The fair maiden need not feel insecure. True men of culture agree that the size of a cake matters not, so long as the bakery is open for business.
When I think of asses, something comes out of me.
Continuing the theme of concentrations of fatty tissue that are appealing to mine eye. Her chest? I made a pair of prototypes using sticky tack so I could find the right shape, and I could also use the stuff to figure out exactly how much epoxy I would need to sculpt the permanent protrusions. With the underlying shape stable, I sculpted the textures back on. I was going for a decrepit, gnarly feel, like our maiden had spent decades in the swamps, or just hung out with the bog witch too much. It could be the daily damp, or strange magic. Whatever the case, her wooden armor isn't just growing moss. It might actually be coming back to life. Maybe if she settled in the swamp for long enough, she could become a bog witch herself. But you can't grow mage caps in the swamp, so Ula keeps it moving. Unlike her abs, her ribs were very thin to begin with, so I couldn't just sand them down a whole bunch. But adding epoxy on top of the existing ribs would bulk her out too much. So rather than separating or adding new ones, I used the wood burner to rearrange the existing molecules. After clipping and sanding away the stringy melted parts, a bit of acetone smoothed out the rest. Further up the body is her head. Trust me.
I am a surgeon!
Before we begin work on the face, though, I glue a magnet into her head so I can attach her mask later on. Then I apply my usual shtick for faces. I make a separating layer with tin foil, then sculpt the face from polymer clay. Unlike epoxy, it gives me time enough to perfect the details, or to good enough the details, as it usually is. Once I'm happy-ish with the sculpt, I bake it and glue it to her head. And as you can see, the extra time matters. If her face cured looking like this, honey would not pass. The first stab at her hair was with cause clay, a polymer clay that's famed for its flexibility. But that did not go well at all. Too little sleep, too much medication, I don't know why, but my brain up and melted attempting to sculpt what should have been a simple pattern. An hour and several redos later, and I had a grand total of 2 braids. So I punched in a cheat code. I bent a little wire into a zigzag shape to keep the center of the braid, and then pressed in the pattern. And I just managed to make some acceptable braids on her scalp. Unfortunately, the zigzag wire didn't help with the free-floating hair strands. In fact, they squashed and cut them, so I tried literally braiding the clay, but couldn't get it tight enough without squishing it. And I tried several pipe rollers, but it just wouldn't produce anything braid-like. Then I thought I got real crafty when I carved a solid braid, which I would then make a mold of, and then use that to cast the cause clay. I mean, it almost worked, but the molds and the casts always came out with some kind of defect, so I gave up on the cause clay and went about stripping and braiding electrical wiring instead, only using clay to sculpt the hair ties and the tufts at the end. Next time I need to get myself some wig hair or string or something. The wire hair holds a pose better than Ben Stiller's baby batter, but that stiffness limits the poses that are possible. Ah yes, learn through doing is the way to up your crafting skill.
Huh?
With her body pretty much done, we're on to her clothes. The armor I'm recreating here is the root set. Noobs might skip this set because its normal stats aren't great. It makes you flammable, and to get the materials you have to fight the deadly representatives of the Swamp HOA. Don't take it personally, they're only there to make sure all housing is at least 5 feet off the ground to protect the endangered turnips. The root chest piece has a pierce resistance so damn good it's relevant in all but the very latest stage of the game, and is always relevant wherever you find those goddamn mosquitoes. But I digress. The skirt really got in the way of the legs, so I thinned out the inside with a sanding drum and then separated some of the tassels with a scalpel. Only some, mind you, because I didn't want the cuts getting close enough to each other that they formed tears in between one another. Kordax is supposed to be an underwater guy, but his details could pass for tree bark as is, so a lot of work here was just rearranging the existing bits and pieces. I thought for sure I would have to shave down the arm details and waste those bits, but sometimes even I get lucky.
Oh! It's separate! Oh, is it's
Once again, the second one was what? Why? Why was it so much easier? Why? Roller coaster of emotions. Still, there weren't quite enough bits to cover all the needed places. So, I used Oyamaru molds to make copies in UV resin. For the larger armor panels on the skirt, I made a mold of some actual tree bark. The bark got soaked with PVA and left to dry, so it would toughen it up and not stick quite as easily to the Oyamaru. After the polymer clay was pressed into the molds and baked, the cast pieces were broken up and roughed around the edges to keep them looking barky. Barkish? Barkley? And that reminds me of something funny. There was a few years there where I honestly did not know that CeeLo Green and Gnarls Barkley was the same people. So what do you say? Like and subscribe? Maybe even check out the Patreon for more support, because apparently I am Skeletor stupid and I could use all the help I could get. Anyway, that bark must have come from the Giving Tree, because
apples.
I just kept finding more uses for the molds. I sculpted the mask in a very simple shape, because I knew I could just add texture to it using the bark mold. Easy peasy. Except I forgot about the magnet in their head until it tugged at the metal sculpting tools and mashed up the clay. I should have stayed in my career as a QA tester. If there's a way to f*** something up, I surely find it.
Come out of there. Come on.
After recovering from that boner, I took some more wires and twisted them up to make branches. Wire trees have been a part of interior decor and tabletop games since like forever. And while I've been involved in both, I think this is the first time I've ever actually made some myself. Aside from the bloodletting, it was pretty fun. 4 out of 5. Next, I got to coat the branches in superglue to lock in the shapes, to remove the very obvious wire texture, and to protect my delicate little metal bonsai from any magical girls who might come crashing through my workshop. Those nasty superglue fumes always hit me like I'm chopping onions. Luckily, it's a tree branch. It doesn't need to be neat, so I just smeared the glue on fast as f*** and got the hell out of there. A few spots where the glue bunched up weirdly, like too close to the ends, I could just grind down later with a diamond disc. I used a similar wire method to make the vines wrapped around the armor, but I couldn't just slap glue on those because the nearby surfaces would wick the glue away. So this time the wires were acting more like a guide for some epoxy vines to go over them. I did make the vines a little chunkier than I intended, but I liked the look. But that meant I had to thicken up the branches so they wouldn't be overshadowed by the vines. Now it's time to arm our queenly Viking, and for this I picked the hammer, because Valheim, the axe, because Viking, and the most powerful weapon in the game, the hoe. You think I'm joking? Well, the Surtlings laughed too. Now they're all dead. To make the hafts, I carved some uneven spirals into some chopsticks. Make sure you carve all your spirals in one direction, because crisscrossing doesn't look natural at all. Then I turned to polymer clay for the business ends. With rock in hand, I slapped the hoe around.
Guide my pimp hand and make it strong, Lord!
Until she had her intended texture, before baking. But for the axe head, it was easier to sculpt clean, then sharpen and scuff up the axe after it was baked. For the wooden mallet, I took a chunk of tree branch and slapped it around with some metal tools to give it that blunted look. And I used a chunk of the failed braided hair carving as a handle. Waste not, want not. Speaking of which, Ragnarok must soon be upon us, because I finally found a use for all of this garbage. The low-effort footstands that come with all the McFarlane action figures shall become my shields. With wood burner in hand, I carved in some heavy straight lines to make the separate planks, and then some very light and slightly messy lines to represent the wood grain. I avoided getting the burner right up to the edge so I wouldn't melt the banding on the rim. Instead, I carved those last few millimeters with a scalpel and scribing tool, which I also used to clean up the curling left by the burner. I did a pass for sanding paper too, but this isn't a cleanup step. It's to make the surface easier for paint to cling to. To make the studs and bucklers, I baked up some polymer spheres and cut them in half. Now on to painting, and I've been looking forward to this ever since I sustained the Nendroid trauma. First we spray everything brown, then paint in all the other local colors, and then we get to drown everything in a dark brown wash. I used a homemade wash, so I tested it on parts of the figure that wouldn't be seen that much, just in case I got the mix wrong. And it was definitely too thick. Once I got the mix right though, I could give everything the Snake River treatment. Including my desk.
This is not Nuln Oil. Why is this happening?
You'd think having done it once, I wouldn't do it again in the same day. But you'd be wrong. At least I did figure out a solution eventually. Once the figure and the desk were fully dry, I moved on to overbrushing, which is painting with a slightly dry brush. And then, dry brushing, which is painting with a very dry brush. It's a personal gripe, and I think overbrushing should be called damp brushing or humid brushing or something, you know? Why is dry brushing the only one that just does what it says on the box? Back to shields, and after masking them off, I went into experimental mode. The first couple I dabbed on layers of paint with a piece of sponge. The goal was to make the shield look old, weathered, and maybe not that well painted to begin with. The work of a warrior, not an artisan. and they didn't come out too bad, save for the red shield, which I did not mask off properly. On the other two shields, I wiggled a paint-soaked Q-tip over them like a miniature paint roller. Probably not a tool Vikings would have had, but if they did, I would keep one in my inventory at all times, just to vandalize any dwarven outposts I come across. Fuck you, you cretinous little miser.
I told you I'd shoot, but you didn't believe me. Why didn't you believe me?
With either painty method, there's pros and cons, and I'm still not sure which one I like the most. More experimenting required. Anyway, I moved on to painting some scuffs and scratches, and then reapplied the brown wash to keep all the panels separated. Late into the process, I decided the bucklers were too smooth, so I sliced off some bits with a scalpel, ground out little dents with the rotary tool, and slightly sanded any sharp edges to give them that hammer-beaten look. After painting the bronze base coat back on, I dabbed a teal wash into the recesses and dry brushed bronze onto the edges to give the metals that tarnished look. Now I know what you might be asking. How many shields does one Viking need? Well, ooh, look at this thing I found. Made in 2002, this boat is old enough to vote. And he does. What's your excuse? I definitely have to gussy it up a bit, but I'm not going overboard. I'm not even adding oars or anything, because why should I put more effort into my boat than the developers put into theirs? Jokes aside, I have a grand enough plan for this boat that I'm saving it for another video. For now, I'm just tarnishing all the overly plasticky looking bits and accentuating the panel lines with a dark wash. The wash refused to stay confined to just the recesses, so I had to shove it around a bit with a silicone tool, and then come back later when it dried with an alcohol wipe to get rid of all the spots and tide marks. In the home stretch of painting, I overbrushed a bright green, which was 1 part highlight and 1 part moss effect. I thought about adding flocking to enhance the mossiness, but I doubt it would survive the rough handling required of an action figure. For Ulla's hair, I dry brushed some white onto gray, and for a minute I considered leaving her that way, but ultimately I continued on with some yellow and golden brown washes, because the dirty blonde look matched her predominantly green and brown color scheme much better. Her war paint was slapped on a little haphazardly, and multiple layers of lighter and darker blues were painted on to indicate spots where paint had collected or rubbed off unevenly. With Ulla looking as weather-beaten as the rest of her outfit, she is now ready to set sail eternal. And there you have it, one sexy Swede surrounded by spooky sticks. All done. As always, I thank you all for watching, but thanks especially to all those who subscribed. Recently, you've helped me surpass a personal milestone of mine. I finally have more subscribers than games in my Steam wishlist.
Yippee!
But we could always use more people. More people to carry iron ore for me. I cannot possibly drop any of the stuff already in my inventory. It's all too important. So go forth, viewers, and tell your friends about the channel and about Valheim. We have crossplay. And I will see you all in the next video, or in the deep north. With the way things are going, I don't know which one's gonna come first. Fare thee well!